welcome to this first of a kind of a video podcast, really, in terms of charity retail and some of the challenges which are facing charity retail and charity online at the moment. I'm joined today with Stephen Sutterby. Stephen and I have known each other for many years, old dogs of e-commerce, the two of us, and he's made it across the pond back to his homeland, back to England. And Stephen, give us a quick overview of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I've been shopping in the charity and thrift sector for most of my adult life. I then ended up working for Seattle Goodwill for 10 years and led their e-commerce operation. And it's probably one of the most successful online not-for-profit e-commerce separations in the world. And I decided it was time to move back to the UK for a lot of personal and family reasons. And here I am. Yeah, I'm working on a consultancy basis now, and thought I'd join up with Andy and Sophia to talk about Vinted.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephen. And Sophia, you join us in terms of our edition this morning, in terms of what our conversation looks like. Sophia, give us an overview of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a sustainable and circular fashion copywriter and content strategist. And I bit the bullet. I went freelance a couple of years ago and I absolutely love it. So I work with a lot of B2C and B2B businesses and clients in the fashion space, just really helping them tell their sustainable fashion story and reach as many people as possible. But I am also an avid charity shopper. Love thrifting, love secondhand shopping, and I have for like most of my life, thanks to a very thrifty mum. So I'm really keen to like see where the charity sector is going and also how that plays into like the secondhand fashion market as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Andy Oscliffe. I'm ex John Lewis, ex British Heart Foundation, ex Oxfam. I guess for the last nearly 9 years, my career has been within charity retail, online, new goods, operational, recycling, sustainability. What else could you throw in there? Did I miss one, which was the festival business as well? So Glastonbury, Download, and lots of others. So thank you very much indeed for listening to us for the next 25 or 30 minutes as we just work our way through some of the challenges. We're talking Vinted today, the rise of Vinted, and should you as a charity, are you as a charity on Vinted? Is it having an impact in the charity shop world? Is it something that you've experimented on? Is it something that you operate on at the moment? And how do you split that between maybe what your eBay sales are or Depop sales versus any new technology that you are trialing? Sophia, I'm going to come to you first. I'm going to ask you a really bold question out the trap. Is are you a vintage shopper?
I am. I am an avid vintage shopper, and it was my partner's birthday last week and I bought his present from Vinted. Unfortunately, as is the case with Vinted, it is too big. So I'm going to have to figure out whether I can send that back and get a refund or just then end up reselling it myself and try and not lose any money. But yeah, I love Vinted.
Okay. And did you get carried away? Did you find what you were looking for, or was it one of those evenings where you just next scroll? I mean, how did it feel? What's it like? I personally, I've not shopped on Vinted.
Oh really? Oh, you're missing out. It is, it does have that kind of addictive doom scrolling. I was getting into a bad habit of I would just be randomly scrolling for things that I didn't necessarily need, because it does come up with all of like your recommended, or you might like this because you like this, and I am a serial liker, so I'll save and add things to my save like wish list, but just to never buy it. But I quite like it because it like allows you to see what's out there. And if I am looking for something specific, like this jacket that I got my partner was a Barber jacket, and if you type in Barber, hundreds, thousands come up. So it was quite easy to have like several options. But I find the sizing in Barber's really weird. So he's got like 2 jackets now, 3 actually now, because I bought this new one to replace one that doesn't fit him anymore. And they're all completely different sizes. And just, yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. So I think that's the only thing with Vinted is definitely getting measurements as opposed to relying on like the sizing.
Okay, Barbara, if you're listening, do you make your stuff in different factories and size them differently? And if you're a Vinted lister, why aren't you putting the sizes on there so we know what we're buying and we can save all that postage back and forth? Stephen, what's your view of Vinted in the charity marketplace? Should charities get involved?
I'll start off by saying I am a Vinted shopper. I find it a lot easier to sort of scroll through on an app than eBay, for example. It's a lot more intuitive, feels nicer. And a bit like Sophia, I do have an issue liking things that I'm never going to buy and then having to weed out that pack as well. I think one of the issues that some people have with Vinted is their recommended pricing. So you might go to put an item up to a list and you might think you're going to get £20 for it, and Vinted will suggest 11. If you go against their recommend pricing, you probably won't sell it very quickly. If you do take their recommended pricing, you've probably got a high chance of selling more quickly. That might be an issue for charities, I don't know. I think the other thing that Sophia touched on is sizing is a big issue. And the Vinted reseller, and it's not all of them, but there's enough to mention it, believe that maybe 1 or 2 photos and no measurements work. And really, you know, as a basic, you need a chest measurement. That solves a lot of initial sort of questions. And that's one of the issues I've had with buying. I did buy a jacket and it was a little bit on the keen side, but I think I've got some work to do on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I've got a big one if you want it.
Oh, it depends how big. The camera might be doing me some favors. I think ultimately the question is, as you posed to me, are we going to sit on the sidelines and watch Vinted do their thing, or are we going to get involved? You don't have to put all your eggs in one basket, but I think it's important to get involved.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? So if you look at the 2 platforms, so eBay in terms of their connection to charity, I'd say over the last 10 years has really developed that offer. eBay were the first for the charity sector in terms of list for free. They were the first in terms of having a dedicated, almost account team, really. And it was only through, I think, probably your efforts, Stephen, and my efforts in terms of pushing really quite hard in terms of, you know, we're big resellers, we're on your platform, what help can you give us, where that charity involvement really developed. And I guess also from a eBay perspective, we've been guided a lot from eBay in terms of technology, in terms of how to list, in terms of what to list, in terms of the format, in terms of the number of pictures, in terms of the item specifics. So we've been given a lot of steer as a charity sector of this makes up a perfect listing. And here comes this platform, which I was going to say out the blue, it's not. It's been around for quite some time. But when you're sat on an evening and suddenly it appears on the most expensive slot on commercial TV as an advert, and it's at the start of the program, the middle of the program, and at the end of the program in a 30-minute slot, you're kind of thinking, wow, that's a lot of advertising and that's a lot of traffic. And in fact, if you look at Vinted, over 800 million items of clothing for sale, and they've moved slightly on now, so they're going to start doing electronics, and they're kind of eking in the mobile phones and maybe cameras, etc., in terms of wanting to pull that into their marketplace. You've seen eBay react and gone, whoa, hang on a minute, this is our marketplace. And now doing, if you're a private seller, you get free listings. But again, Safi, I'm going to come to you. What's your view from a marketing point of view inside a charity? You must be thinking, do we get involved with this? I mean, what do you feel? Does it feel something easy that a charity could get involved with?
Easy, I think, depends on the size of the charity and what capacity they have to be able to have someone dedicated to putting all of those listings up onto Vinted. They might already be on eBay. And so is it a case of, do we have the same items on two different platforms? Then you have to manage, like, what if that gets sold on one platform, you have to take it off the other platform. Some platforms don't allow you to do cross-posting. And it's, you know, as we mentioned earlier about like the sizing and measurements and stuff, all of that takes quite a lot of time and like you know, people power to be able to get those listings up there. I think from like a marketing perspective, having a presence on somewhere like Vinted as a charity would be quite good, because that's where a lot of secondhand shoppers are spending their time. But then, you know, we talked about just before we started recording about whether people are actually aware of who they're buying from. And I think when it comes to Vinted, there's like, as a shopper, there's like two camps of seller that I'm aware of. It's the casual people that are just clearing out their wardrobe, clearing out their bookshelves, that just, you know, have a couple of listings and that's it, versus those that are using it as a secondary or primary income. And I think if charities would kind of sit somewhere on that spectrum, I don't know whether like users would necessarily be aware of the like buying from a charity and then like following that charity's page to get notifications. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Stephen, what's your view? And if we talk about, we can talk about Vinted, we can talk about marketplaces in general. What do charities feel that their presence on these platforms drives more interactions, or the customers know, or do customers care?
I think if you work from the premise that if you have one item, just take one item, for example, on a number of marketplaces, and potentially it's going to get more views would potentially lead to more sales. It's how you manage that as a charity. And something that sells on eBay today for £15 might only sell on Vinted for 10. That's just a reality at the moment. Certainly what I'm seeing when I look at Vinted, that the pricing's gone very low on Vinted, which is also a reflection of the amount of product in the marketplace. I think this is also a sort of secondary issue for charities now with Vinted. I feel like it's more with Vinted than eBay in some ways. Is now, as a donor, somebody who's going to donate clothing items, are you going to take them to the charity shop, or maybe you're just going to pop them on Vinted and make a few quid? I even know my brother, for example, sold a jacket recently, and he accepted £4.50, and I asked him, was it even worth his while? And he said, yeah, he just wraps it, packages it, drops it off to the post office. He's made a few quid. And this is the other challenge. It's not just Vinted. I mean, there's all these marketplaces that are potentially taking away donations from charities. But back to your question, I think you've got to be in the game. And what portion of your product you push to Vinted, that's a bigger question.
Yeah. Safi, just on your point around multiple platform listing, it's always been that's the goal. You know, someone with a piece of technology, and you can list it once and sell it over multiple platforms, and it is smart enough to manage those platforms in terms of withdrawing the product from the platform that it didn't sell on. And Stephen and I are kind of invested in one organisation who are doing that at the moment, and they're really prevalent in the charity sector. Then that's ultimately the goal. Now, let's just talk about the impact on charity, because I think this is a really good point. This is really quite interesting as well. So Vinted in Europe last year did a survey of 100,000 users, and they tell you which countries it was in. So of course we're all skeptical here in the UK, so it's not UK users, but Belgium, Poland, the Netherlands, and a couple of other countries as well. 100,000 users surveyed, so quite a big populace in terms of getting the information from. And they reported that millennials are Vinted's biggest marketplace. making up 44% of users, followed by Gen X, who make up 32% of users. So, good old, you've got the thick end of 76% of users on Vinted falling into quite a narrow age bracket. And this is the best bit. So Vinted found that millennials were most likely to reinvest their money from items sold on the site into purchasing other second-hand items, but Gen Zs were more likely to withdraw the money earned from selling. And we hear about this a lot. We hear about different gens. I'll buy something for £200. I'll wear it 3 or 4 times, and when I finish with it, I'll sell it. And I think that's a challenge for charities. That's a challenge for stock donation. It's a challenge for an interaction with your shopper, supporter, and donor. And we do know, and we know this from the recycling element of what's happening with charity retail, that the quality of product now that's coming into a charity shop, and when I say quality, you can get a perfectly good usable t-shirt for £2.99, but it's worth £2.99. And what the charity shop really wants is, it wants brands, it wants some labels. St. Michael's, which is the old Marks and Spencer's brand, is worth a fortune if it's donated and you can sell it online. There's a real following out there that want that particular brand. So charities have been quite used to that. They've been quite used to these, high-end brands that get donated, or even, middle of the road brands. Barber, for example, being a really good example, is a classic charity shop find. But now we're finding a lot of that product's being sold on Vinted, so it's having that kind of effect. Safia, I'm going to come to you in terms of, if you're a charity and if you're a charity retailer, should you be kind of putting some messaging out there in terms of, you can do the same with our shop. You can do the same in terms of find some nice items and then maybe donate them back to us. Should the charities be trying to get involved with this, kind of muscle in on Vinted's marketplace and try and pull on the heartstrings and emotions a little bit more, in terms of, we were the original people in the marketplace selling really good stuff. Come back to us for the really good stuff and continue donating. What's the message for charity retailers?
Yeah, I think it's actually quite a tricky one, because, charity shops have had to raise their prices. And as we know, they're not getting the quality items that they used to. So they're raising their prices on things that might not necessarily, to the savvy, thrifty shopper, they might not necessarily feel as like worth it, or they think that charity shops are getting expensive. I feel like that's quite a lot of the kind of general consensus that I'm hearing, but it's kind of like they're in between a rock and a hard place. So I think absolutely, honing in on their messaging and really trying to like appeal to that emotional side, and help people realize the bigger picture, right? Help them realize that by making their quality donations to a charity shop, they're not just, helping to keep clothing in circulation. They're not just decluttering their wardrobes, but they're also helping a much bigger cause. Depending on whatever it is the charity is, helping to fight against or support. And I think that that's kind of the missing piece, is people have viewed charity shops as a place to get a bargain or a place to offload things that they no longer need. They've forgotten what the true reason why charity shops exist. And I think that charity shops charities in general do a really great job of that in their like fundraising appeals, their donating appeals. Like I get letters from Oxfam all the time, and they're really quite, touching and emotional, and they do that really well. But how do they then translate that to the average charity shop shopper? Definitely, is the big question. Yeah.
I'll go for a last question before we wrap things up. Stephen, let's just say you're in charge of one of the big national charities, and are you feeling pressured to be on Vinted? Are you going to turn into the organisation and say, right, we're going on Vinted, we're going to do a project? What would you do? What's your feeling?
I think like any marketplace, you should do some testing, see how it goes. I just want to jump back to what Safia was talking about, and I think charities amplifying their mission and their cause is really important. it's really interesting that it's not a battle, but the charities place in this marketplace, the reuse marketplace, is kind of one on the high street and online, and they're in a unique position. And although the stores are well branded, and there is a bit of messaging around the store, I wonder if they could maybe progress that a bit, or bring back some of the old work that they used to do and have more interactions that involve some of the messaging, make it a bit more personal, especially for if you're donating something or making a purchase. I think a bit of messaging would go a long way.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's and I think sometimes you can pick up a parcel from an online charity reseller, and there's nothing much in there when it arrives, is there? There's nothing
That's true.
around, what brand is, what your cause you're supporting. Here's your pair of Levi 501s and so I'm going to wrap that up there. Thank you very much indeed this morning to guests Stephen Sutterby and Safia Alaf. I really appreciate the conversation. Hope you do as a charity retailer as well. Why not drop us a line in terms of what the next video podcast looks like? Maybe it's TikTok Marketplace. Let's explore that one, shall we? For now, thank you. And of course, do drop us a line if you've got any questions.